All right. Well, welcome everyone. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. All right, let's get started. So good afternoon and welcome. Thank you for joining us for today's Media Landscapes webinar on what is new in digital citizenship. My name is Linda Mork, and I am part of the reference outreach and instruction team at Minitex in Minnesota. And we are excited to be bringing you this webinar series. I'm going to go ahead and show you our funding partners here, PALS, Minnesota Multi-Type Library Systems, CRIPSLA. We are very grateful to them for their support. So our goals of this media landscape series that we've been doing since last fall are really to help Minnesota library staff understand the current and really complicated media and information landscape, to learn how to navigate that landscape, and then to just offer some strategies for working with our patrons and our students so that they can do so as well. You can, here are the events that we've had so far. Last fall, we kicked off the campaign with Renee Hobbs, who talked to us about navigating a world full of propaganda. We had John Mac Freeman talking to us about deepfakes. Elisa Hines talked to us about critical thinking. And Michael Spikes talked to us about news literacy. So those are our four big webinars last spring. And then this fall, we've already had two. We kicked off the fall series with Upholding Journalism Ethics and Standards with Dave Hauge and Kelly Smith from the Star Trib. And most recently, we had Jamika Anderson talking to us about how to civically engage young adults through media literacy education. So they've all been really different and they've all been really awesome. You can find out more, and if you would like to go back and watch those recordings, you can definitely do so at levelupmn.org. I'll go ahead when I'm done and put that link in the chat as well. But on Level Up, that's our Minnesota library professional development website. It's intended for libraries of all types, public libraries, school libraries, academic libraries. We have professional development calendar on that site. We have a lot of resources on that site. And then we have our 23 Things companion curriculum that the Minnesota Multi-Types came up with that go along with this Media Landscapes series. And that's where you can find the recordings as well, and also some upcoming presentations. So check that out for sure. So I think that's it. We're going to be at the end of the Zoom, an evaluation will pop up. We'll also send that to everyone who registered when we get the recording. I'll send that out in the recording link to you. And if you'd like CEUs, please let us know in that email. Just respond to that email that we send back and we will get you those. All right, so that's all the business. So today I'm super excited to be introducing the awesome Mary Messacomer. Mary, if you don't know her, is just an outstanding teacher and presenter, and I have personally learned so much from her. She has been in education for over 40 years in various roles, including at the Minnesota Department of Education, at the Northwest Links Consortium, and then most recently as an instructor and outreach facilitator at Sourcewell. And she just has a wealth of experience. So thank you, Mary. I'm so happy you are here. I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing, and I'm gonna turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Linda. And I am so delighted to see a lot of names in the participants that I recognize and some that I don't. So hello, everyone. And I hope you're all doing well in this crazy COVID space that we find ourselves in these days. All of the ups and downs. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen as well. And we are going to talk about digital citizenship today, which is a topic that is near and dear to my heart just because it really interests me and I feel that it's important to stay current with it. And because I work primarily in education. My language might be kind of school focused, but I want my participants here to know that I am a lifelong learner and lover of everything library as well, which is how I met Linda and Beth and some of these other wonderful people at Minitex. So just please know that the resources and everything I'm going to talk about today are good for librarians, both working in schools and in other public libraries and our multi-types and everywhere else as well. So thank you so much for joining me today. So just a little bit of information about me. Thank you, Linda, for that great introduction. So you know a little bit more about me. Here's my contact information, and I have shared my slide deck in the chat, and I'll make sure that Linda and Beth have that afterwards as well to mail out to you so that you have it. But anytime you have questions or are wondering about any of the things I'm talking about today, please feel free to reach out to me and ask. I'm probably more available by email these days than phone, just because we are still at Sourcewell Technology. We're still in a space where we're working at least part of the days at home still. So I'm coming to you from my very elegant living room today. I'm saying that somewhat sarcastically because it's not very elegant, but it's me. What can I say? And here is the link to my slide deck. Don't worry about trying to grab this right now. Linda will share this out, and I did put it in the chat, and I'll put it in the chat if I remember before we leave today too. But I made this for you all, so please make a copy and use it any way that you want to. If there's resources in here that you find helpful, or if you want to use it with students or library patrons, any part of it, it's all for you. So what I'd like to do, if you wouldn't mind, just to kick us off, if you wouldn't mind just putting in the chat, just your name, your first name, where you come from, and what's your biggest concern about digital, I see I have about with, I couldn't make up my mind apparently. So what is your biggest concern about digital citizenship? So if you want to just put that in the chat, if you're comfortable doing that, I'd love to just kind of see who's here and see what you're thinking. And I'll give you a minute to do that. Staying current, definitely. Taking responsibility for what you do online, definitely, Beth. Social and emotional health, thank you, Mike. An accurate source, yep, that's a big one too. These are great, thank you. Reliable sources. Val, thanks for joining us from Chicago. Credibility, yes. Yep, students' lack of critical thinking. Hi, Olivia. Yep, teaching digital citizenship to youth. Lots of political polarization in social media. Thank you, Nate. And that definitely is impacting us with digital citizenship. Great. Well, thank you for being willing to kind of share your thoughts there, because I'm going to talk about, in some way or another, I'm going to talk about all those things this afternoon. So I'm glad those were topics that are on your mind. So the first place I like to start is how I personally look at digital citizenship and the definition that I use. And the definition that I have used for many years now comes from some gentlemen who wrote a book years ago on digital citizenship. And it was, I believe their names were Mike Ribble and Gerald Bailey. And they wrote a book about there being 9 elements of digital citizenship. And I really think that this is a really good way to divide them up. And I recently ran across this chart, which kind of divides them up in terms of age group for working with students and citizens. So these are fairly self-explanatory. I'm not going to go through each and every one, but I will say that these have impacted all of us probably at some point. Digital literacy in particular is becoming, I think, more and more important as we try to help students and our library customers understand, what's the right tool for the job, for what we're trying to accomplish. There are so many apps and things out there. How do we decide those things? And then also, we spend a lot of time in my world talking about digital access because, of course, with COVID-19, we had all this rush now to distance learning in schools. And even now, too, with the Delta variant with COVID, schools are going back and forth between distance learning, or some have had a hybrid schedule that allows kids to work from home on certain days and come to class on certain days. And so this whole idea of digital access in terms of everybody being able to access not only broadband, but also devices and learning resources that are online has become increasingly important. And then there's also a lot of concern too around this whole idea of digital health and wellness. At the last legislative session, because the legislative hearings were online, I listened to a few of them, and there were some very interesting organizations coming forth and talking about screen time and whether that's good or bad for kids, and kind of what the thoughts were from some of these groups were very interesting. So I'll talk a little bit about that today as well. So, but if you're looking for kind of a way to divvy this up and figure out how to talk to students about it, I really think this is a nice chart with a very sensible breakdown of the topics.
Mary, that's great. We have a question from Mike Walker. Mike is just wondering where digital footprint might come in that chart that you just put up. Do you think that's law or health and wellness, or kind of all of them?
That's actually in a number of places, I think, Mike. Thanks for that question. I think it falls into a number of these, including digital etiquette, probably digital literacy, digital communication. When we talk about our digital footprint in terms of how we're appearing online and what people can find about us online, there's a number of places that can get looped in. Digital security would be another one, as we're creating a digital footprint and wanting to keep some of our life private. That plays in as well. So that's a great question, Mike. And I would just say, I think it comes into a number of these. Anything else, Linda, before I go on?
Nope, not yet.
Okay. Well, some of the newer, I say newish trends because digital citizenship has been around for a long time. And we used to spend a lot of time working with kids about how to be safe online and don't do this and don't do that and avoid this and avoid that. And what we're really moving to, what I am seeing is that we're really moving to more of here's what's good to do online, and here are some things that are acceptable and some ways to use social media and technology and all these tools very positively to impact the world. But some of the big issues that I've seen coming up in the last couple of years here, of course, have been screen time. Parents worry a lot about how much screen time is good or bad for their child. Digital literacy, that whole idea that I referenced about knowing how to choose the right tool for the job. Media literacy has really grown in terms of impact as well, being able to be a discerning user of information and to evaluate sources. Cybersecurity, I work with school districts quite a bit, and I know that cybersecurity is high on the list of concerns for education technology directors and others in terms of keeping networks safe and avoiding all kinds of data breaches and that kind of thing. Data security and privacy, so using tools where we can to make sure that our information stays secure and safe. A new movement is more to have students as leaders in the use of social media tools and other forms of technology rather than as just passive receivers. And I'll talk about that here as well. And the idea of parents and teachers, and I will say librarians here as well, as us being mentors and showing by good example what good digital citizenship means. And then, of course, we have some topics that aren't as new, distracted driving with our teens and young adults, and probably older adults too. I've had to learn the hard way not to do that. Social media, and of course, there's hacking that can go on for both good and bad. So these are just some of the things that I've been seeing really popping up in conversations around our state and in some of the national networks that I follow. So the first thing I want to point out when I say what's new are the ISTE standards. And for those of you who might not be familiar, ISTE is the International Society for Technology and Education, and they have a series of standards for administrators, educators, students, and instructional coaches. And they do have a standard for both students and teachers that is around digital citizen. And what you will look, I'm not going to read these to you. You can check out these standards on your own. But what you will notice as you look through them is there is an onus of responsibility on the individual to be proactive, manage their digital identity, demonstrate their understanding of the rights and obligations of using intellectual property, managing their own personal data, and engaging in positive legal and ethical behavior. This is different from the old way where we used to say, oh, don't put this online, don't put that online, stay away from this tool or that tool. It's really now the acknowledgement that our students and young people and old people, we're all getting out there and using technology and the internet more and more for our daily lives and work and how we connect as a society. So we really want to enforce some of these ideas to get students in moving in a positive way when it comes to digital citizenship. ISTE has a new poster out there that you can order. You can get it for free. You can download it and print it off for your libraries or your classrooms. And what they are really talking about is moving away from this protective idea of digital citizenship to a more proactive idea. And the idea that we can encourage kids to connect and network with others to solve social problems, to learn how to communicate with empathy and avoid cyberbullying. So instead of just constantly hammering that message of don't cyberbullying, don't cyberbully people and don't do this and don't do that, we can really be encouraging kids to communicate online with empathy and not be part of that problem. They also need help managing their identity online, and Mike referred to the digital footprint. We all know that we all have one, and it's important for us to go and check that every so often to see what's out there on the internet about us. Sometimes you might be pleasantly surprised, sometimes you might be unpleasantly surprised by the amount of information that's there. And I know I'm probably speaking to the choir when I mention some of these things, because you're all information technology and literacy professionals. And then lastly, but adults, as adults in our students' lives or our kids, our own children's lives or grandchildren, whatever it might be, modeling that good behavior. And I will tell you, there are times I have to step away. I call it step away from the keyboard when I've been on social media too. It's very tempting to just quick put something out there without thinking. And so I've really kind of worked hard at retraining myself to not do that and to not jump into some of this toxic behavior that can be out on social media. So, but just really thinking about it differently. So here's the link where you can get that classroom poster if you're interested. And what ISTE is now saying is we've got students becoming digital agents, paying attention to their digital self and paying attention to their digital interactions. So the agent here for positive change, the self, if I wanted to refer to that as my digital footprint, and then the digital interactor, which refers to how I'm communicating ethically and with compassion online. Okay, I'm going to pause there just a second and see if anybody has any questions on that so far.
Yeah, we had a comment and then a question. So Mike pointed out kind of what you're talking about, that students, differentiation in the type of screen time is really important. Like what if we're talking consumption versus creation, active versus passive, isolating versus connecting is really important. And I think that's definitely a shift that's happening.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and then we have Nate who said the shift from a thou shalt not model to one of empowering informed decision making can be really tough for parents to grasp.
Yes.
How do you sell this form of digital citizenship to parents and educators?
Yep, that is a very good question, Nate. And it is tough for parents because, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in detail during the presentation, but I want to address it since you asked the question. I think one of the things is that parents, I think sometimes struggle to know what their child is doing online because there's so much out there and there's apps and games and networks. And sometimes it's really tough for parents to engage in that world. Well, because life is busy and you got a lot of things to worry about. So I'm going to have some resources in here about for working with parents as well. But I do think one of the things is to encourage that conversation. So if you've got, if you're in a school and you're having a parent night, it's a good time to just talk to parents about how they're feeling about what their kids are doing online and how much they know about what their kids are doing online. And I've got some good resources in here for parents also having that talk with their child in terms of being online and what is good. And one thing that comes up a lot for me as a question is sometimes when the school is giving out devices for the students to use for educational purposes, sometimes the parents feel like they don't have the same rights over those devices that they would if it was their own provided from the home. And just a reminder to parents that they're still the parent in that situation. And if there's a point in time where they feel as a family that they want to limit the screen time for their kids or take the device away and charge it in a space where the student doesn't have access to it, those are still all okay things to do. You're still the parent and you're still in charge when it comes to what you allow in your home and with your family. But thanks, Nate. That is an awesome question.
Yeah, and Mike says it is also a balance between parents who want to lock down everything at the expense of the child's well-being versus helping students develop self-regulation so that when they leave school and home, they're healthy digital citizens.
Exactly, Mike. Thank you for that. It's very well stated. Absolutely. So just to continue on my track here with ISTE, just note too that ISTE has an educator standard as well. And that one speaks to teachers and librarians and others creating those experiences in school with technology to create opportunities for students to learn about being responsible users online and establishing that learning culture that promotes curiosity. Mentoring students. So I had I have a cohort going through ISTE certification right now, and one of the things that the teachers there said is, geez, I just realized that when I do my presentations to my class, I haven't been citing images and things. I just kind of throw them in there. And she realized that that's not a good model to show her students. So she kind of made the promise to herself that she would now be sure to cite her images and use free and open sourced images from now on when she works with her students. So that's just one small example of a way to mentor, model, and promote. And she was also going to show her students how to find things and also to cite them correctly. So just one thing to ask, and again, I said I use my educator hat here a lot. Am I modeling good digital citizenship for my students? If you don't have students, if you're in a library, am I modeling that good digital citizenship for my library patrons or customers as well? So I want to talk a little bit about screen time, and my friend Mike brought this up as well. There's always a debate about screen time, and oh my gosh, my kid is spending so much time on this screen. And I think especially since we've been in this COVID dilemma the last 18 months to almost 2 years now, there's been a lot more screen time because kids have been attending school online and just haven't been able to be with their friends as much if they're quarantined or just avoiding infection or whatever. So there's been a lot of talk about screen time out there. But as Mike pointed out, there is a big difference in quality versus quantity of screen time. So it's just really important for parents and educators and librarians to understand, what is that person doing when they're online? Are they just sitting there watching YouTube videos and being a very passive consumer? Or are they interacting? Are they creating their own content? Are they using it to learn? Are they using it to connect with others, to create positive connections? There's many, research shows there's many benefits, for example, of gaming. So not all gaming is bad. When you get a student or a young person or any person who really enjoys doing computer games or video games, there are some benefits to that. So it's just really important to kind of consider the individual, the age of the individual, and what they're doing. And I just really enjoyed this book by Jordan Shapiro, who was a speaker at the Impact Education Conference a couple of years ago, but he's a father and he's a researcher, and he wrote this book called The New Childhood. And I don't get any kickbacks for recommending his book, but he just had a really interesting way of looking at the new childhood when it comes to connections in a digital world, because that's now kind of our children's playground. And he had a lot of really interesting things to say about going online with your kids and being participatory as a parent. And so if that's something that you're wondering about, and I expect you can get this book from your library. You don't necessarily have to buy it if you're interested in it. So I would just say, check that out and see what he has to say. Common sense media. I know those of you in probably the school sector are very familiar with common sense media. I really find they stay abreast with all of these issues in some of the best ways that I've seen an organization do that. They have some very solid information there for parents about screen time and some recommendations based on age and some other helpful resources for parents. So Nate, I know you asked that question about selling, how do I sell this to parents? This is a really good place to go and check it out. But just note that one of the things that the experts are really coming out and saying now is to encourage people to go online with your kids. So then when we come to digital literacy, this is a tough one because this is do students know how to pick the right tool to get the job done. Back in the day, when I first got involved with technology and education, which was a while ago now, we were really worried about making sure students knew how to use Microsoft Word or Microsoft PowerPoint or whatever it was. And now our conversations are really much more around, there's a number of tools out there, and we want our students to understand how to pick the best tool for the job. And that's really what digital literacy kind of boils down to. And it also gets into being able to create their own information that's based in sound research. And I put the definition in here from the American Library Association Task Force. But there's a lot of technologies out there. And like one of the things that kids, I get pushback a lot is like emails for old people. My nephews and nieces tell me that all the time. You know, emails for old people. And my answer to that is, well, maybe, but it is still the primary form of conversation or correspondence in the business world, is it not? So I think that there's just as much education about learning to write an effective communication through email or whatever the tool might be. There are good ways to text people and not to text people. Texting your teacher, dude, grade my paper, maybe isn't real appropriate. And so we need to help our kids navigate all of these things as well. Media literacy is growing and growing, especially, of course, with the last election that we have and all the politics that are going on. It seems everything has become political these days, and there are some kind of weird things going on in the media world with things called deep fakes, which are videos that look like they're legitimate, but they've been created with artificial intelligence. And I've got in here a really interesting article for you on deep fakes, and also a little news piece here from NBC News that explains how those deep fakes are made and how the artificial intelligence plays into it. And it's quite fascinating. And so kids, particularly, but many adults too, need to understand that what you're seeing, it's that old thing that we used to say, oh, it's on the internet, it must be true, right? So people need some help navigating some of this stuff because there are a lot of things out there that are just not legitimate in terms of truth or news sources or however you want to look at that. And so media literacy is growing in importance and really has grown over the last couple of years. And especially now as we have social media and lots of news coming from places outside of our standard news media outlets, which is not to say it's wrong or bad. It's just important that people know how to evaluate those sources for credibility and legitimacy. And I'm not going to play that video here. I'm going to just let you guys watch it on your own time. The other organization that I have been involved with or just have seen some great things from is the News Literacy Project. And I've given you links here to their website. They have excellent newsletters and tips for teaching. Excuse me, for teaching about media and news literacy. They have a curriculum, a free curriculum for educators called Checkology that you can use, and then also some great sources for talking to kids about the news. And there's a link here to some conversations they had with kids about the news. So if you haven't checked out, excuse me, I've been talking, I'm going to cough now. If you haven't checked out the News Literacy Project, this is a great place to look. And they often have free news literacy camps where you can attend for a day or part of a day and get some further resources and actually talk to reporters who do journalism as a living and talk about journalistic standards and some of those things. Excuse me, allergies. Cybersecurity and cybercrime. This is impacting all of us now. I don't know what to say about it other than it is out there everywhere. We all need to be vigilant. We're all responsible for our own cybersecurity. In schools, we're responsible for the cybersecurity of our students. And I know librarians, you take this very seriously as well. So I could spend an entire hour just talking about this, but all of the different types of phishing and different things that we get in our mailboxes and on our phones, things to be aware of, urgent requests to take action, requests for personal information, requests for money, threats or demands. And I just want educators for sure to know that student data has a very high value when it comes to cybercrime. And the reason being is that kids under the age of 16 or so don't have a credit history yet. So their identity can be, if it's stolen, is of high value because there's no history associated with it that the hacker has to worry about. They've kind of got a clean slate with a name and social security number and whatever else they're going after. So just be vigilant, know that this stuff is out there. This is something too, you can, anytime you're taking students or library customers online to show them things, you can kind of do some reminders about how to stay safe online, set strong passwords and so on. So there are things you can just kind of do in your daily work here to help people stay safe. I bring this in as an example of something that goes on with hacking. This picture is called a pineapple device. There's loads of other types of these things out there. You're not supposed to operate these without a license, but I'm assuming many people do because you can buy them on the internet for about $150. And what this little innocuous looking device allows you to do is to go into the coffee shop or the library or somewhere, restaurant, wherever there's a wireless network, set this up, and it's going to allow you to spy on the traffic that's going on that wireless network, where people are heading, who's on the network, who's doing what. And these things have been found in ceiling tiles, in hospitals where people were trying to steal data. Kids can get their hands on them. All you have to do is go to YouTube, and there's loads of videos about how to use one. And there's all different kinds of them. I'm showing you the pineapple here. There's also ones called turtles. Some of them look like just USB devices. So if you're in a school or library and you see something like this kind of sitting out there, it is a good reason to question what that person might be doing with that. And then just some practical data security and privacy things that I share and that are good to remind our students about when we're with them too are, for social media, check out those privacy settings on your applications. you can set those up so that you can share just as much or as little about yourself on Facebook and Instagram and Snapchat and whatever else you might be using. If you're in a school or library and you're stepping away from that computer that might be showing some private data about a library customer or a student, hit that lock screen or log off of that system before you step away. Think before sharing information, especially in schools. We are always, I think, sending student information around in emails, teachers sharing with different pieces of information with another teacher, for example, or with an administrator as they're trying to problem solve for a student. So just really think about what you're sharing there, and also think about where you're keeping files and paper things that may have sensitive data on them. Make sure those aren't just laying around and can have casual access. And then, of course, secure where you can your mobile devices. Don't leave your laptop sitting on the front seat of the car. All those practical common sense type things that we can do to just make sure we police ourselves and help keep our data secure and private. Distracted driving, I mentioned that earlier, continues to be a problem. This is a video. I don't know that you can view it for yourselves. It's actually funny, but it's also very effective in talking about distracted driving, because this was an experiment that was done in Belgium where they told people coming in for their driving test that they would need to be able to text and drive at the same time. So I will be open and say, by the way, there is an Oppenheimer that gets flown here. It's beeped out, but you can tell what he's saying. But this is a great way if you are talking to your own kids about distracted driving at home, or want to take a look at this. It does a great message with a little bit of a humorous twist. I also put a link here. I call it our new law in Minnesota. It's a couple of years old now, but we now, of course, have that hands-free law in Minnesota where we're not supposed to be texting and chatting on the phone and so forth when we're driving around. Social media. These are all of the things now, and there's more than this, but these are the most popular ones that people are using these days. And I put a link in here to each one of these if you want to explore them further. But these are the things that students are using and everybody is using for social media. There's probably more. There's probably 5 new ones that came out today that I don't know about, but you can kind of just tell these are some of the popular things that are going on that we're all accessing and using. And so this is, again, a place where I say, if you're using these tools, and I am a huge Facebook user and I love Facebook. It helps me stay connected with people I otherwise wouldn't stay connected with. It helps me join in some professional networks and so forth, but I am very careful with my privacy settings on there. And I have checked those out and have them set so that a minimum amount of information about me gets shared publicly. So if you're not familiar with these, check them out and just know that these are things that students are using, and well, a lot of other people are using them too. There are some laws and rules that apply to us in schools, and a lot of these are really tied to education funding. They're not necessarily a criminal law or a penalty if you're found to not be in compliance. It's going to more affect your education funding from certain programs. But the one that I know that schools have started paying a lot more attention to is the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, or COPA. And that one requires businesses that are collecting information from kids that are 13 and under to get parental permission. To that extent, we're using a lot of different third-party applications in school districts. To that extent, a lot of districts are taking the stance that they're at a minimum going to just inform the parents about what types of applications that they're using in the classroom so that they're aware that kids are using accounts and setting things up. I put links in here. You can read more about each of these. The Children's Internet Protection Act and the Protecting Children in 21st Century Act, those are tied to our federal E-rate funding for schools and libraries that helps us pay for internet access. For schools, they do require that we be filtering internet. They also require that we have an internet safety acceptable use policy, and that we're also educating our students in some fashion on internet safety and acceptable use in order to be eligible for that funding. Okay, I'm going to just pause there. Linda, are there any more questions or comments that are in the chat here?
Let's see, not much. Mike did post a nice resource on new apps, parentology.com. So
oh, great. Okay.
That is interesting. Any other questions? All right, doesn't sound like it.
All right, well, if they're not, then I will just wind up here by just sharing some different activities and ideas and resources with you. And again, you'll have the link to my slide deck, so you'll have all these. So don't feel like you have to scramble to write them down. So just a couple simple activities that you can do when you have students or library customers that you're working with online is to have them Google their name and just see what comes up. And the two questions are, do you see something there that you don't like or that surprises you? And then generally looking at it, how positive is your digital footprint? And Mike I saw he had to run out and leave us, but I know that where he works at Edina, they do a lot of work trying to help students understand that everything that goes out there stays out there, and that employers and colleges and lots of other people are Googling you to see what your online profile looks like. So that's just a very simple activity that you can do with people, take them through and see what they discover. Another activity is if you're in a school or library and you want to do this with coworkers or other teachers or whatever, you can just ask that question that I asked you at the beginning. What is your biggest concern and what can you do about it? And I just have a link to, it's just a Google Doc that you can go here and complete an action plan. So if you have an issue that you want to explore further, and kind of maybe come up with a policy around it or a practice that you're going to implement in your school and library, this is a good starting point to do that. And again, these are very simple, just very common sense activities. Some basics that I just always, even if it's not your job to teach digital citizenship per se, anytime you're working with students or library customers, you can always share this information, just reminding people to set strong passwords. We all know that a strong password is so long and has many numbers and characters in it, and we can't possibly remember it by ourselves. So you might want to use a password management tool such as LastPass. But you want those strong passwords. You want to make sure kids especially never share passwords. They get into those situations where they share a password with a friend, and the next thing you know, the friend isn't a friend, and we've got a cyberbullying situation on our hands. Make sure that when you're walking away from your computers that you're logging off any systems that might have data or doing that screen lock. Be very careful when you're out using those public networks in the coffee shop or the library or whatever, that you're not conducting any sensitive business over those. Always think before posting, and trust me, I've had to really work on this myself too, because our gut reaction is to react quickly to something online, and email and texting have given us such a instant gratification culture online that it's hard sometimes to make yourself stop and think before you post or send a message. And then again, if you're using those social media tools, check those privacy settings. They all have them, and they all can provide you with some protections. And then this is just if you wanted to use this with kids, this is kind of a fun little wrap that talks to them about posting smart. And I'm not going to, again, make you sit here and watch it. It's from Vocabulary. One of the things I explored was this TED Talk, which would be great for older students, from Monica Lewinsky. And she speaks very openly about what happened to her and her relationship with President Clinton. And she was in the public light long before we had social media and all of those tools. And she talks about just this public shaming and this culture of humiliation that we have, which is now even a bigger problem, I think, with all the social media that we have. She does a very nice job here of speaking to these issues, and it's well worth a watch. Common Sense Media, I mentioned before, is a great resource. I also look a lot to the NetSmarts workshop, which comes from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. They have a lot of great videos and resources for talking to kids about different internet safety issues, cyberbullying, and so on. The Center for Cyberbullying Research, Nate, I think, was the one who asked about working with parents too. There are so many great tools in this site that talk about cyberbullying, and there's tip sheets that you can use with parents, tip sheets you can use with students. They have a sample contractual agreement that a parent can use with their child about use of their device. There's just lots of really good things there. Copyright, as librarians, I know I've got a bunch of experts here on copyright, but I do have here just some different resources on copyright. And I've done a few workshops for teachers just in terms of basic copyright and what to watch for and how to assess risk when you're using outside materials in your online classes and so forth. But got here some good resources for you here. And I oftentimes have reached out to Nancy Sims, who's the University of Minnesota law librarian, and she is very helpful as well. There is a new relatively new digital citizenship handbook for school leaders. I think ISTE or Corwin Press or one of the education publishers has this one, but it has lesson plans, different leveled approaches to talking about digital citizenship, different responsibilities by roles, because a lot of times I think in our schools, the teachers will say, well, it's not really my job to teach this, but there are different places you can bring these concepts into curriculum when you're working with the kids on technology. For example, if you're having them do a research paper in English, what better time to teach them about assessing sources and learning about validity. And of course, talking to your school library media specialist about those things. This is another book that I really enjoyed, Social Media, and Jennifer Casa-Todd talks in her book a lot about having kids just move from basic digital citizenship knowledge to actually being digital leaders online. And that fits in with that whole ISTE idea that I shared with you about helping kids use social media for the public good, not just for connecting with each other, but there's many social problems and things that can be moved ahead with social media. So this is a good piece of reading for you as well. Devora Heitner wrote an excellent book about the challenges of raising digital natives. Nate, you were wondering about a resource for parents. This is a great video to share with parents. And she also has a book out that is available. And one of the school districts in central Minnesota actually did a community book study of her book because there were a number of parents who were concerned about this. And so the district actually invested and made some copies available and had parent groups discuss the book. So lots of different ways to go about this. I would never not mention my very favorite source of all wisdom, which is eLibrary Minnesota, and all of the different resources they have available for students. If you're trying to work with kids to help them be discerning users of information, it's great to let them know that all of these tools are available to them and they don't have to rely on just a basic Google search. And of course, I learned a lot and continued to learn a lot from going through some of the Level Up activities that Linda mentioned at the beginning, the new 23 things. These are excellent. And I was doing, Linda, I was doing a workshop on cybersecurity for educators, and I picked up a bunch of new information just working through some of your activities on here. So I wanted to make sure people know to look at those as well. This is just a little poster that you can use with students when you're working with them. These again are little reminders that you can have around your classroom or in your handouts for activities and so forth. And I just am giving Sylvia Duckworth credit there. And then here is kind of I showed you those 9 elements of digital citizenship at the beginning. Here's some very simple definitions. Sorry, I lost my word. Definitions here that you can use to kind of communicate about those. And lastly, I do work in ISTE certification. Sourcewell Technology is a certified provider. So if you are all interested in taking the coursework to become an ISTE certified educator, we can help you with that. So that's my shameless self-promotion for today. And with that, I will stop because I have talked and I'm hoping everybody got something new today that they didn't know before.
Mary, that was so great. Thank you so much for being so generous and sharing all of those resources and your knowledge. Let's see, we have some thank yous in the chat. Thanks for the many shout outs to school librarians, says
Absolutely.
And thanks for the shout out for eLibrary Minnesota and the Minnesota Multitypes for creating the 23 things, which will be continuing to be added. Any other last questions for Mary?
And I just want to thank you at Minitex, Linda, you and Beth, for allowing me to present today. I know some of it may not have been super new to some of the people, but hopefully everybody walked away with something new they can use. So
I definitely learned a lot and some great new resources to take a look at. So, and good tips too for working with patrons and students, just to model that behavior, to go online with them, have those conversations. I think one of the challenges I think for schools is, you know, you said for people who don't think it's not their job to teach digital citizenship, and yet it's probably all of our jobs to teach that. And I think one of the ones is who is teaching this? Like, where does it fit in, you know, K-12 curriculum? And really that's such an important role for the school library media specialists.
Yes.
Yeah, that's great.
Yes. And sometimes, and districts handle it, schools handle it differently. Some of them have a full-blown curriculum that they work through. Others just kind of say, well, we're going to have a day, on this day, we're going to talk about it. It's all over the place. So that's why I just really encourage all educators to embed it. And I think that's what, ISTE's experts are saying too, is it just should be embedded wherever we can.
So important. That's great. All right. Well, we're at 4 o'clock. Great job with the timing.
All right.
Thank you. And thank you so much, attendees. We'll be sending out some information when we get the recording. All right. Have a great day.
Thanks very much.
Yeah,
thanks, everybody.